Good afternoon, I'm Medha Basu, GovInsider's Deputy Editor. Welcome to this session on stability in an uncertain world as part of GovInsider Live's Festival of Innovation. Over the next hour, we'll hear from global leaders on forces shaping the future of the Internet. First up, the International Telecommunications Union, the UN agency in charge of promoting access to tech and setting 5G standards across the globe. Please welcome Deputy Secretary General Malcolm Johnson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and many thanks to GovInsider for inviting me to this year's Live Festival of Innovation. And congratulations for selecting such a challenging topic for this session. Of course, we all yearn for stability in our lives. No one likes change, even if it's for the better. If it was difficult to achieve stability with all the uncertainties in the world prior to COVID-19, now it's even more difficult and even more longed for. Yet for most of us, stability would happily mean going back to pre-COVID, a time of being able to interact with work colleagues, to go to classes or socialize with friends and relatives without the worry of getting sick. This is often what we think of when we talk about returning to normal. For many, however, the normal is not what they would want to return to. Millions of people around the world suffer from extreme poverty, hunger, lack of education, clean water and sanitation, and all the other areas addressed in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Progress in these areas was not up to the ambitious timescales set, but progress was being made. And now the pandemic has reversed many of these gains and led to even greater challenges. So how do we achieve stability in such an uncertain world? I would like to suggest 3 areas that at least would help. First, more reliance on information and communications technologies. Second, better collaboration, cooperation, and coordination at the national, regional, and international level. And third, adoption of a new, more sustainable social economic model based on the lessons learned from the pandemic. COVID-19 has illustrated the power and promise of information and communication technologies, ICTs, as never before. Never has there been so much reliance, appreciation, and emphasis placed on the important role and capacity of ICTs. During lockdown, ICTs have given billions of people around the world the ability to continue their work, studies, and care for others, and remain connected to loved ones. Here, let me give credit to the network operators and the platform providers that have been able to respond so successfully to the huge increase in demand over the past few months. It has been an incredible demonstration of the resilience of this technology. I believe that the increased recognition of the importance of being connected as a result of this crisis will make it sooner rather than later that everyone everywhere is connected. It's now clear to all that leveraging ICTs to connect everyone everywhere will be essential to achieve the SDGs. And that includes the 3.6 billion people around the world that are still not connected to the internet. Mostly those living in the rural areas and remote communities. The digital gender divide is widening, and even though average connection prices are broadly falling, broadband services remain too expensive for most consumers in the poor areas. Many services are yet to become fully accessible to persons with disabilities, including the elderly. All these people have been deprived of the digital lifeline that has been instrumental in keeping economies and societies going during the crisis. This is despite the fact that 97% of the world population now live within reach of a mobile cellular signal. A new study from ITU estimates it might cost hundreds of billions of dollars to bring all these people online by 2030. There's no doubt that this can only be achieved through an unprecedented and concerted effort from the public and the private sectors. It's a high cost, but the cost of not doing so in lives and human misery is even higher. So international collaboration, cooperation, and coordination between all stakeholders, public and private, is essential to fight this virus, but also to deliver the Sustainable Development Agenda. Only when we all work together, bring in our own specific competencies to the table, avoiding duplication of effort and pooling our resources for the common good, will we succeed. Now, ITU is the UN specialized agency for ICTs. It offers a good example of collaboration. As we have a diverse membership of 193 governments, uniquely 900 private sector companies, universities, and regional and international organizations are also members of ITU, and all work together to harness the power of the technology as a source for good, especially in coordinating the use of the radio spectrum and satellite orbits, developing technical international standards, and promoting best practices. Last year, ITU held the World Radio Communication Conference. It was a good example of such collaboration in revising the radio regulations, the international treaty governing the use of the radio spectrum and satellite orbits. And among the many outcomes of this conference was the adoption of a new regulatory framework for the deployment of low Earth orbiting satellite networks, and the identification of new frequency bands for high altitude platforms. Both these open up the opportunities for affordable connection to the underserved communities in the remote and rural areas. And the conference also identified additional spectrum for 5G, an additional 17.25 gigahertz of spectrum. And that's 8 times more spectrum than was previously available. This harmonized spectrum will facilitate the deployment of 5G mobile networks worldwide, ensuring coordination and compatibility with the various other services using the radio spectrum. 5G offers huge benefits over the previous generation in terms of capacity, transporting a huge amount of data much faster, more reliably and securely, and with much reduced latency. This is very important for some key applications of 5G, such as healthcare, autonomous vehicles, smart cities, and collaborative robotics, to name just a few. In addition to coordinating the shared global use of the radio spectrum and satellite orbits, ITU also develops technical international standards that ensure interoperability and interconnection of equipment and services from different vendors and operators. This creates a worldwide market and reduces costs through economies of scale. These standards provide much needed certainty in today's uncertain world, and they do it by building trust, confidence, and security in the use of ICTs. Trust is at the core of ITU's work. It is a cornerstone of bridging the digital divide and creating stability. International standards create efficiencies and economies of scale that ultimately result in lower costs to producers and lower prices to customers. At a time when investment in ICT's infrastructure is critical, standards protect previous investment while creating the confidence to continue investing in our digital future. In this area, as in other areas of ITU's work, cross-industry and public-private sector collaboration is essential. My hope is that we will use this unique moment in history to strengthen collaboration and cooperation nationally, regionally, and internationally, public and private sector. At stake is our ability to build the digital infrastructure to connect everyone and to give everybody access to digital services that are safe, attractive, and affordable. Finally, I very much hope that the lessons learned from the pandemic will not be forgotten as we struggle to tackle more long-term global challenges such as climate change. ICTs are an essential part of building back better for a safer, more connected, and more sustainable world. The lockdown has shown that we don't have to commute to our office every day. We don't have to travel the world for a business meeting. We don't have to rely on paper. We can be efficient and effective working from home and at the same time benefit from a better work-life balance. For nearly 6 months now, ITU has continued its activities efficiently and successfully, working from home, continuing with the coordination of the radio spectrum and satellite orbits, continuing to develop international technical standards through virtual meetings and conferences, which, by the way, have proved to be more inclusive than physical meetings. This includes reaching the final stage of the radio interface standard for 5G. For many years, I have been pressing for more flexible, paperless working in ITU, and COVID-19 achieved it in a few weeks. Many skeptics have now been converted. So let's hope there will be no going back. I look forward to discussing these issues further with the distinguished panel, and in particular, to reflect on the real meaning of stability. 6 months into a pandemic that has shocked the world and left us even more uncertain about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm, for sharing the critical work that ITU is doing. Tech companies have growing impact on the world order. How have nations responded? For more on this, we're joined by Henri Verdier, France's ambassador for digital affairs, on the nation's diplomacy with the tech industry. Henri, you're just on mute, I think.
Hello. So good morning or good afternoon or whatever you are. It's a pleasure to join you. I was listening carefully and I was thinking that our conversation is a bit paradoxal, but we will have to face this paradox. Because, of course, for the founding fathers of Internet, it was a factor of stability. Exchanging knowledge, building cooperation, working together was supposed to give us a better national and international stability. And Internet was and still is a factor of stability in this moving world, allowing exchange of knowledge, of information, of cooperation, allowing us to build on common infrastructures for business and innovation, and we will have to protect these acquis. But as you said, the COVID pandemic was a great reminder on how much our societies and our networks are now interconnected, and how highly dependent we are on information technologies, as we see with this format of this meeting. And this interconnection gave us immeasurable opportunities, but also new threats against our citizens, our economies, our democracies, and maybe a systemic threat, a risk of instability for systemic reason. And the situation now starts to be quite worrying, and some of the recent developments we see even threaten the unity of Internet. So we can see around us, but I want to mention, because you're speaking from the COVID lesson, I consider that it would have been impossible to organize this huge lockdown worldwide without Internet, to share the information to the citizen, to be able to live in our houses, to work a bit, to have solidarity, to remain connected to the families, etc. Not to have access to some information, some culture, some activities. We did use a lot Internet. So the answer to the pandemic is the answer of those times, and with and because of Internet. But during the same times, we can see the contestation of the power of huge monopolies, the infodemics of very stupid advices against the virus or about on all of the conspiracy theories. The recent announcement from several countries of the ban of some social networks, the proposition to go to a new organization of internet governance, we will have to face the current slow dissociation of technological integration between United States and China, which seems to have started and will have significant consequences. We'll have, I continue my list of concerns. The increase of malicious cyber activity, and during the COVID crisis, it was the fair of malicious activities, and sometimes from state-based organization, but more often cybercriminality. Lately, in France, we are starting to consider that the ransomware issue starts to be a macroeconomic issue, because it's an exponential. Every year, we double the amount of ransomware business, and now it starts to threat even the global growth of the world. So probably here we will need a new and different answer, something really international, really multi-stakeholder, and to face a major threat on our economies. And we have to deal with this issue. So to do this, what can we do? First, we need to intensify our efforts to anticipate and prevent crises in cyberspace. At the national level, that means developing and sometimes clarifying our own national cyber doctrines, but it also implies to work two important mainline efforts: strengthening our common resilience, including through capacity building. And now every developed countries start to understand that as we say very often in digital issues, the resistance of a chain is a resistance of the weakened part of the chain. So we have to be sure that everyone is able to protect himself. We will have to build trust and cooperation between states to reduce the risk of misperception and escalation. And we work hard on this, as that's an important part of digital diplomacy. And unfortunately, anticipating crisis is sometimes not enough. We need to develop mechanisms and structures allowing us to manage crisis and prevent escalation. And here we need an international framework to foster a stable cyberspace where all actors can resolve their issue peacefully and abide by common rules and norms. And for France and a lot of countries, for Singapore, the emergence of such a framework can only be based on full implementation of international law, including the UN Charter, the International Human Rights Law, and International Humanitarian Law. And we have to fully apply this to the cyberspace. And we make progress here during United Nations conversation. In Europe, I want to be precise and to develop briefly this. We consider that the COVID crisis proved to us that we need to think about what we call sovereignty. And I have to be very clear, this conversation, European conversation about sovereignty, is not a concern for the importance of protecting the principles of a free, open, secure, and unified internet. Our goal is a free, open, secure, and unified internet. But we consider that if we cannot do anything, if we are weak, if we don't make research, if we don't have companies, if we don't send very strong people to the international negotiation about internet governance, we won't be able to protect open, secure, free, and unified internet. So we are trying to build a vision of sovereignty, which is not supremacy. It's more like strategic autonomy. We want to be able to make decisions about privacy, about freedom of speech, about free innovation and permissionless innovation, about economic development. It has to do maybe with subsidiarity. We consider that everyone should be able to make decisions about his own future. So this vision, we are trying to build a vision of sovereignty which is not a zero-sum game. It's not against other countries. We can cooperate to empower the sovereignty of different countries. It's more about a freedom, a political freedom, and so about actual democracy, because we want all citizens to be able to take decisions. And we cannot say, oh, sorry, that's impossible because terms of use of these companies forbid the law that you want to pass. And probably in the months and years that are in front of us, we will work hard. You will see Europe working through the recovery plan, for example, on the location in Europe or key industrial capacities, such as conception, foundries, supply chain, robotics, and things like this. You will see Europe involving in a legislative action about structuring digital platforms. It's not. We consider that some platforms now has a supranational systemic impact, and we, as government, we have to discuss with them because we cannot authorize the over-determination of our economy and our democracy without a strong point of view from the government. So subsequently, it will involve an economic regulation, of course, and the Commission will explore ex-ante rules about this systemic platform, and it's a direct consequence of the fact that we need stability, because we cannot have such superpower without any democratic feedback organizing the world through their own competition. So, as I said, cybersecurity through international law negotiation cooperation, economic regulation to be sure that the future of the world is not written by huge technical monopolies and economic monopolies. And probably I want to share with you, because we want to exchange, I want to share with you the last very important issue. We consider that it's time to have a new reflection and a new involvement about digital commons. Because first, states cannot achieve this. States cannot guarantee alone stability. We must collectively develop a multi-stakeholder approach. The digital space was created through companies, research, states, citizen engagement, and we can protect this just with this multi-stakeholder involvement. And one very important part of this multi-stakeholder involvement is in digital commons, the fact that we have some very important resources that don't allow to everyone, because we build this together and we protect this together, is one of the best parts of the internet and one of the great factors of stabilities. So to conclude in a few words, stability in the digital world represents now a key challenge for the years to come. Internet alone will not automatically create stability. We will have to fight for this. It will be a challenge for states, for private sector, for civil societies. Everyone has a role to play. France is committed through its digital diplomacy, which I have to coordinate to promote and to safeguard this vision of a free, open, secure, and unified internet. But it's not a given. We will have to stand for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henri. That was inspiring. Our growing digital connectivity is making security more complex. We'll now hear from a company that helps nations gain insights on their digital infrastructure. I'm pleased to introduce Vladimir Yordanov, Senior Director of Solution Engineering at Gigamon.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you Henri and Malcolm for your insightful comments. You touched on a lot of points, and I took an extensive notes. But generally, what I will do in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to touch on the digital aspect, on how can we bring stability, or what is it really coming up in the future. So let's look into the. Just give me a second. Oops. Okay, I have some troubles here with okay, there we go again. All right. Okay, never mind. What I can speak without the slides. So when you look into the stability from a digital point of view, when it happens, so when you look into what's really how the Accenture made a comment, made a research and say for the last couple of decades, 200 companies have disappeared from the overall landscape, and the main reason for it is that they could not adjust to the digital economy or to the new tomorrow. And this digital transformation that we're seeing now, that has been accelerated because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is not really new. It has been happening all the time. Internet brought a lot of changes. Then the mobile, the smartphone and mobile communication revolutions brought a lot of changes. And today, the changes that we see that were brought up from because of the pandemic, as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, they are is just accelerating the digital transformation. And everybody is aware of the famous word from the Microsoft CEO, who said that over the last couple of weeks we have seen a transformation that has we have seen actually years worth of transformations. So speaking in more practical terms, where do we see companies in money? If pandemic or not, economic crisis or not, you really have to continue to spend money to stay in business or to make money. And there was a research from IDC that when they look across over the next couple of years for where the companies will be spending money on, what really strike me when I look into these numbers is that for 2020, the IT spending is going to remain relatively flat. But one area that will continue to increase throughout 2023 is new technologies, and also services. So in new technologies, there are three aspects that are considered. One of them is 5G. Obviously, everybody is talking about 5G nowadays. Artificial intelligence is another area that have been singled out as an area on new technologies that the companies will continue to invest. And the other one that also is coming up, it's coming up at a decreasing pace, is quantum computing. So all of those three technologies, all of those three new technologies that we see coming up into today's into our lives, they would be driving transformations. An increase of, and in terms of stability, I think that the only stability that we can rely on now is that we will continue to change. The only constant that we have right now is the change, and that is a postulate that has been brought up, that actually has been around for quite some time. And we will continue to see those changes. How we go through these changes is what really matters. And to touch on on some of the points that Malcolm brought, Malcolm, you talk about that it's really the working from home actually works. If you learn a lesson from today's pandemic, is that yes, we do, and we can work from home. And you're absolutely right. It does improve the work-life balance. And after the pandemic subsides, it is estimated that about more than 50% of the companies, they will make working from home a permanent thing. And in point that to some of the points that Henri mentioned, Henri, I think that you touched some very important points in terms of collaboration on the international level, government regulations, and I'm very happy to see the progress that Singapore government has made in terms of collaboration with other countries around the world. And Singapore has positioned itself as a unifier, as a communicator that has been actively reaching out to other countries and to other government agencies, and this has been really working hand to hand with other governments and the points that Henri mentioned. And you're absolutely right. Internet, by its nature, is not stable. Is disruptive and will continue to be disruptive, but also creates a lot of changes, a lot of dangers in terms of cybersecurity. Also, as more and more services are becoming online, that also bring new challenges, especially in terms of stability, new ways to attack and disrupt communications, and new ways from state sponsored or malicious actors to reach out and compromise personal information and inflict on our privacy, identity theft, and so on and so forth. And one of the important things from a technology point of view, what we can do, we need to have visibility in what's going on. It is very difficult to protect or to plan for anything that may have happened if you don't have visibility. So it's really important to plug yourself into the network. Source of truth. Everything that have happened, everything that is happening, all of the digital communications go over a medium, go over a network. And having a good visibility, a good control, good analytics, it really can help into bringing stability and really understanding what's going on. Think about it like when you drive at night and when you have a very limited visibility. Yes, you're still capable to make some decisions. You know that certain things are happening, but you can't really see the full picture. And that's the difference that brings in a good visibility and integration platform. It's like driving in the night and driving at daytime when you really have a complete overview and when you can make a decisions, anticipate, and bring stability to your infrastructure. Companies today adding services, adding bandwidth, adding new cloud applications and a very fast pace. And as you do so does the complexity increases. And once you know the pandemic gave us a little bit of a break, when we stopped and look back how far we have gone so far, if we would see that the technology that have been adopted, the companies has been adopted, in addition to enable them to do other things, also increases the complexity. And taming that complexity, bringing stability into the today's environment, it is what should be the focus on the organizations. The simpler it is, the better it works. And if it doesn't have to be complex, don't make it complex. And on that note, I think that that's all I have to say. So I'll give it to the rest of the panelists and for Q&A section. Thank you.
Thank you, Vlad. We've got everyone back here for the panel discussion. And I also want to introduce John Lee, Managing Director of Asia Pacific at the Global Resilience Federation, who's also going to be joining us for the panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into all of your ideas, but perhaps, Malcolm, I could start with you first. How well have nations done on creating collective standards and fair rules to govern behavior online?
Thanks very much, Medha. Well, I'm very pleased to hear the other panelists also emphasize the importance of collaboration. And as I mentioned earlier, standards, international standards, are really essential to provide some stability when we're considering investing in future digital platforms. It's very important that people don't get sidetracked into adopting proprietary standards. We work very closely now with WHO, especially during this pandemic, but even before. And we established a joint group with WHO to look at how we can use artificial intelligence in the healthcare sector. This came about because a number of health ministers were concerned that even within their own country, hospitals were adopting different incompatible technologies so that they weren't able to share data between themselves within their own country, never mind internationally. So WHO is very worried about this, and since we work closely with WHO, and we in ITU have the advantage of a large private sector membership who drive all our standards work, they came to us with this, and we formed this joint group so that WHO can specify the requirements, and then we ask our industry members to develop the international standards to meet these requirements, to ensure that anyone adopting these standards would then be confident that there would be this interoperability and interconnection between platforms within the same country and internationally. So it's very important that we have this collaboration, public and private sector, more so now than ever before. And this is the success of international standards. And it also, of course, brings down the costs, because anybody producing equipment or services to an international standard can enter into a global market so that they can reduce the costs through the economies of scale. So collaboration, as I said, is one of the key features, and hopefully this pandemic has brought greater collaboration between public and private sector that will benefit everyone as we go forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are also, however, seeing a fragmentation of internet as nations compete to assert their authority online. Henri, I want to get your thoughts on what this will mean for our ability to innovate with tech.
Sorry, I didn't clearly understand your question.
Let me just repeat that. We're seeing a fragmentation of the internet, as you mentioned in your talk earlier. What will this mean for our ability to innovate with tech?
Yeah, I will answer, but I want to start from the point Vladimir made. yes, internet is pure disruption, and so it's not a factor of stability, it's a factor of innovation. And maybe from my perspective, it's the best innovation platform the humanity had ever. And that's why it's so amazing. We had stabilizing feedback. We had resilience strategies. It was the unique internet, the common protocol, TCP/IP, open source, transparency, and a culture of cooperation, of freedom of speech, and more or less in various situations, it was able to guarantee a kind of stability, of dynamic stability, but of stability. And from my perspective, these days, yes, the main threat is that we have these infrastructures, which is disruptive, and we start to weaken some very essential parts of the internet history, which were factors of stability. So we can have the worst of the two worlds. And the fragmentation of internet will be stupid if we could imagine 3, 5, 7 different regional internet. It will be less economic development because we will have to reinvent everything in every region. So it would be stupid. It will be less exchanges, even about ideas or culture of education. Not just about business and money, but business and money matters also. And from my perspective, because I see, we the diplomats, we see a world with more and more aggressivity, with more and more nationalism, with more and more, with less democracy. If we start not speaking together, we will have this kind of divergence. We won't understand each other. Asia won't understand US won't understand Africa won't understand Europe, and misunderstanding between civilization is a factor of war. So definitively we have to stand firmly and to fight against this fragmentation.
Thank you, Henri. And Vlad, I wanted to get your thoughts on this fragmentation. What kind of new vulnerabilities does this open up, particularly with 5G coming up?
Okay, well, thank you. That is a very good question. 5G has been in the news for actually quite some time, and especially about vulnerabilities that may bring. So for everyone that is hearing, I would like to mention that 5G by itself, the standard as defined by the 3GPP, which is the governing authority, is more secure than 4G. And there's a lot of technological improvements within the standard itself that makes the communications more secure. However, technology is technology and used by the people, and people do make mistakes because the implementation, and Henri, you mentioned a little bit about collaboration and government regulations. The implementations of the security within the infrastructure at present is more or less up to the operator itself. So the tools are there, but how they would be implemented, that is depends on two things: on the telecom operator itself and the governing body in terms of what standards have they published. And we'll see more and more coming up. Now, in terms of security, what are the challenges that 5G brings in terms of security as a communication platform? One thing what we need to understand is that 5G is not just a faster version of 4G. Yes, we have more speed. That is true. And by standard, it's 20 gigabit download and 10 gigabit per second upload, but this is just by standard. The actual implementation is going to be a lot less. In addition to faster speed, we have more density. You have more. You can have up to 1 million devices per square kilometer. Low latency and faster data transfer rates. And also there's new architectures and new services such as multi-access edge computing, slicing, and a few other innovations. All of those technologies that are provided, all of those technology innovations that are provided by 5G ensure fast communications, fast data transfer rate, low latency between many devices. And that is happening over mobile communication. Sounds a lot like internet, doesn't it? And this is the danger that 5G communication brings, because there will be more devices. The attack surface would be bigger, and that will introduce more opportunities for the malicious actors to have an opportunity to compromise or to inflict damage. Another danger that is another not so nice scenario that was brought up by 5G is that integration, machine-to-machine communications, and integration of critical infrastructure within the communication systems. So system, especially on the industrial side, that traditionally were not connected, now they're starting to be connected. And that is also introduced a new vulnerabilities where potentially critical infrastructure systems could be compromised over the internet, over 5G, over the communications that is enabled by 5G. And while if I shut down your website, or if I steal your data, or if you do something bad in your computer system, yes, it's a very big economic damage, and your company and business and reputation may suffer dramatically. But the danger to the life or to the public is minimal. With critical infrastructure, that is reversed. Attacks on critical infrastructure, subway, factories, traffic light control systems, that puts the public in danger. And this is some of the vulnerabilities and some of the dangers that 5G potentially would bring. As I mentioned earlier, the mechanisms to defend ourselves and protect ourselves are there. It's not that we don't have anything to protect ourselves. Of course we do. We have enough amount of technology. We have enough security technologies that are good and that work. What is really important is that how they will be implemented, and with the help of the government regulations and industry regulators, that process will speed up, and there will be clear guidelines how to secure 5G communication infrastructure so that we have a resilient and safe communications without exposure, cybersecurity exposure to attacks from malicious actors.
Thank you, Vlad. I just want to go to John now, because John, you're part of an organization that helps nations share intelligence on threats to critical infrastructure. How have the hubs that you've helped countries create? How has it helped countries tackle these threats?
Yeah, thank you, Medha, and thank you, GovInsider, for inviting me to be here on this panel, hearing a lot of good facts about the need for collaboration and communication to build a sustainable, economy or society to meet the future demands. And I think OTI, or Operational Technology Information Sharing Analysis Center, was launched on the 1st October 2019 to help critical infrastructure owners in Asia Pacific, starting from Singapore, ASEAN, and the rest of Asia Pacific, to increase their cyber resilience, to be more safe in terms of, as Vladimir has mentioned, about the threats to critical assets or critical infrastructure that can lead to loss of life. Imagine if the water supply has been poisoned by the adversary getting into the systems to increase the level of chlorine. That can lead to a loss of lives and impact the services. So we have seen in 2016 when the Ukrainian the electricity energy was hacked, leading to 200,000 homes without electricity. So as we continue this digital transformation, I think more and more businesses will be on the digital platform that is accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, as what Vladimir has shared, rightly so. But we need to think of ways on how to increase our security, our resilience towards the threats caused by the increased attack surface. So the Operational Technology Information Sharing Analysis Center, it's one of the forums for collaboration. So our members are actually sharing information in a trusted community of trust, carefully vetted. So they belong to the critical infrastructure sectors that we provide intelligence gathered from the regulators, the government bodies, the operational technology intelligence partners, as well as certs, and the members also share among themselves. So one member's detection is another member's protection. So we believe that sharing of information will increase the cyber resiliency of the whole industry. And one of the things, I think the threats of OT networks is the lack of visibility on what is connected. And we know that in the new digital world, more and more things will be connected. Industrial IoT sensors will be connected to the internet to monitor the critical infrastructures remotely. And these are vulnerable, and we need to actually take steps to reduce this attack surface or protect the attack surface from the adversaries. And recently in COVID-19, there's one nation-state attackers that leverage on the COVID-19 to do phishing campaigns against 6 countries, including Singapore, Japan, South Korea, US, India, and United Kingdom. So I think all these, the adversaries are getting more and more confident, and they're changing their attack methods to try to breach the infrastructure. And nations, I think, need to talk, as well as groups like the Information Sharing Analysis Center. They provide a forum for the members to talk to each other, to share best practices, to share information about incidents, to increase the cyber resilience of the whole industry.
Thank you, John. And if now we could just pivot the conversation a bit to talk about the recovery that will need to take place from COVID-19. Henri, what is the importance of good digital infrastructure to post-COVID recovery?
The importance of what did you say?
Importance of good digital infrastructure to post-COVID recovery.
Wow, so important. We all discovered that our society can continue even through lockdown, even through systemic threat, even through pandemic, because of infrastructures, not just physical infrastructures, but also logical infrastructures like data or knowledge. For example, in France, we had to accelerate the global information policy within the government. That's just an example, but just to count every day the people who died, etc. You need an information system. So I want to underline this. Infrastructures are cable and machines, etc. But that's also data, software, and common knowledge, for example. And so the material infrastructure of internet was designed for resilience. We all know the history of the DARPA, etc. It was designed to be able to face the break of a part of the network. I'm not sure that the business layers and the data layers and the top layers were designed for such a resilience, and we'll have a lot of lessons to learn from this crisis. Are we organized to face something we didn't plan, new threat, and so I think that France, like every country, we are just working on the return of experience, and we are learning a lot from this crisis.
Thank you, Henri. Malcolm, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, you're obviously optimistic about the role of technology in this pandemic, but COVID-19 has also uncovered a lot of inequalities in access to technology and digital tools. How can some of these be addressed, do you think?
Yes, well, as Henri says, we've got a lot of lessons to learn from this pandemic. And one of them is the reliance that has been placed on the technology during the pandemic for providing information to citizens, helping people to continue their businesses and to keep in touch with friends and relatives. So we've always in ITU been trying to get the message across about the importance of being connected to the internet and having access to the technology in the context of the SDGs. I believe now there's no question, you know, we don't have to continue persuading people about this. Now, I think everybody realizes the importance of this digital technology for our lives in the future. So hopefully we will get more investment, and we need a secure basis for that investment, as I've mentioned. So multilateralism now is more important than ever before. We, as Henri says, we can't afford to let fragmentation. We need international collaboration, interconnection, interoperability more than ever before. And we have the means, as Vladimir says, we have these security systems in place. We all have to be able to apply them and use them. So international collaboration really is the essential lesson, I think, that's coming out of this. And there's so many different organizations, John's organization, the Internet Society, ICANN, all these different organizations really all need to come together now to bring forward their own specific competencies and work together. Avoid duplication. There is a lot of duplication going on. We need to pool our resources and work to the common good. And let's hope that's the lesson that's going to come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. And I'd just like to end this conversation on an optimistic note. So I'd like to know what everyone is excited about at the moment. If we could start with you, John, first.
Yeah, I think for one, the recognition that we need to collaborate, I think I'm excited about that, because I think we can make the world better if we learn how to share. And this COVID-19, I think, brings us the situation where we can reset our thinking to reset the economy. So you can leverage on this pandemic to improve things going forward. Hearing from Malcolm, who mentioned about the need for sharing, not duplicating the efforts, and Henri as well as his role in the ambassador for digital, and Vladimir as well in terms of providing solutions. So I think all of us can actually look and work together, identify areas where we can actually plug in our expertise, our capabilities to increase the cyber resilience of the whole economy, the whole world, so that we can actually take it forward. Because as we know, there's no turning back, to go back to pre-COVID days. And as Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum says, we can leverage on this COVID-19 in his new book, The Great Digital Reset, to transform the economies, to make it better. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to be part of this transformation.
Fantastic. Vlad, what excites you at the moment?
Well, pretty much in what John said, but I'm very excited about the digital transformation, the new technology that are coming up. As a technology person, I enjoy new technology, and I'm really excited about the new things that COVID-19 prove that we can do. And of course, it's a horrible tragedy, and pandemic is not a good thing. But one bright spot that I see in the whole situation is that the digital transformation, the new technology and innovation that has brought up.
Malcolm, your thoughts?
Yes, well, I'm an optimist. So thanks for the question. I believe that a lot of good will come out of this pandemic, especially, let me return to the issue of climate change. We've always been at the UN climate change conferences trying to get the message across about the importance of ICTs in combating and mitigating and adapting to climate change. And I think that's become evident now. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Delhi. I usually visit Delhi at least once a year and suffer from the pollution and the air quality. Terrible, of course, in Delhi. But my friends in Delhi tell me now that the air is cleaner than it's been for generations. So it just shows, we can help to combat the emissions that are causing climate change through the use of this technology. And hopefully that's one good lesson that will come out of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Malcolm. And finally, what about you, Henri?
So I work in this field for 25 years, and I'm more and more excited because we do innovate more and more. And we have seen nothing. Now we'll start to speak seriously about smart cities, new health, I don't know, spatial, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology in the body, and so we didn't see anything. The best is to become. So I'm very excited. I just want to add one small but very important point from my perspective. You spoke and you were right about digital divide. Very often we consider that rich countries has to think about emerging countries because we are better, because we have more infrastructures, more knowledge, more engineers, etc. It's partly true. But what we saw during the COVID crisis is that we can learn a lot from emerging countries. And for example, about the fact that to fight a pandemic, you need community building, you need to empower communities. A lot of African countries, because they have the knowledge of communities, and because they had to face Ebola, for example, they had a lot of lessons to share with us. And so fighting the digital divide is not just an unilateral way. It's opening a better conversation with more point of view and with more knowledge. And maybe it's also something to be optimistic, because we can learn from the whole humanity. And I think it's a good conclusion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Henri, Malcolm, Vlad, and John, for a fantastic discussion. That's all we have time for in this session. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time.
Thank
and
you.
For
Thank you.
our audience, just head on over to GovInsider's Facebook and YouTube for our next session now on cyber futures.
Thank you.